Thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody to our second session. I will start by introducing our panelists. First, we have Despina Daliani, that is a clinical research associate at Honorac Clinical, and she's also the co-lead of the e-consent and clinical trial recruitment use cases within the PharmaLedger project. And also she holds a Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Science by the Institute of Biomedical Science, and she completed a master's in food and drink innovation. She has published papers related to her specialties, and prior joining Honorac, she has worked in GSK in the fields of microbiology and quality assurance. Welcome, Despina. We also have Todd Coverwell. He's a clinical solutions lead for UCB Bioscience, overseeing the electronic trial master file. Todd is also leader of UCB's effort in exploring the implementation of blockchain technology within clinical trials, and he have been working with pharmaceutical companies and CRO for over 20 years as a SaaS programmer, application manager, business analytics, and trial master expert. Welcome, Todd, also. Also, we have Dr. Christina Livitkabia. She's our R&D project manager and postdoc researcher working in the Technology Institute Center for Research and Technologies in Greece, third. She have a PhD and Doctor of Medical Sciences from the Aristotle University in Thessaloniki, and she have also a master's degree in telemedicine, e-health, and in economics. She have plenty experience in academia, industry, and our R&D facilities in several European countries, and as well as running in different startups. So, and finally, she's a primary research expert involved in different fields, including healthcare, medicine, lifestyle and well-being, and including different technologies, meaning AI, IOT, and blockchain. Welcome also. And finally, we have Dr. Giuseppe Prontelli. He's graduating as a medical doctor at the University of Pisa, and he has a specialization in hygiene and public health and a PhD in methodological research from the University of Rome, and a Master of Science in Pediatric Medicine Development and Evaluations. He's currently consultant at a clinical trial in the Hospital Bambino Gesù, which is a children's specialized hospital, and he works as principal investigator and over 100 profit and non-profit pediatric clinical trials. And he's a researcher in several EU-funded projects and collaborates in the design of new clinical trials. So as you can see, we have plenty experience with our panelists. And to go to the theme, I think it's important to give a little bit of context about the clinical trial different process. Over the last year, we have heard a lot of clinical trials based off the COVID situation, and more or less we have an idea of the outcomes of those processes. But in between, there is a lot of different steps that it have to be covered. And with the context of PharmaLedger, we are addressing them, trying to improve them and give a better solution within the context of the clinical trial. So I think it's a good start to leave the floor to Giuseppe as expert in the clinical trials from the context of the principal investigator and being the closest one to the patients. That at the end is our the benefits of the result of these trials in a way. So Giuseppe, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jose. All of us in the last year, the pandemic year, has been familiar with clinical trial results of double-blind, placebo-controlled trials on vaccines or antiviral drugs for COVID-19, but clinical trials are complex things that are the main source of evidence on safety and efficacy of new therapy from many decades. It is a complex activity done most of all in high-level hospital that try to have quality data about the effect of new drugs, new vaccine, or new therapy, even diet or lifestyle intervention to people with different diseases. The object of a clinical trial is probably the most complex in nature, is the human being, no? And me as a physician in a structure that devote to children, can I say that children are also more complex than adult human being because of their developing nature and also the need to have relation not only between the patient and the physician, but also with parents and legal guardians. In such a context, there are also psychological factors and also legal factors that have to be addressed. Data collected by patients are not easily verified, and with the complexity of clinical trials and collection of data directly from patient, let's think to ECG device that send data for 24 hours a day for more days. These collection and sending of data become very important to be verified. Another thing that we want to highlight in this conversation is the trust that we need to establish with parents and patients that decide to join a clinical trial. In such a context, a technology that gives to patient and to legal guardians or parents all the information in a trustable way and allow the patients or the parents to access in real time to relevant information, ask for questions and decide to provide additional consent or deny additional consent for a procedure that in this dynamic process can happen. It's a really interesting feature, and blockchain can help in this way, because if we providing the right information give to patients and parents the reassurance that their sensitive data will be used in the right way without access to any others, and their consent will be provided and verified in a trustable way, it would be a very important way to go on with our activities and have a more efficient research.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, based on your clear introduction to us, we have two topics that we have to highlight here. One is related to the IoT technology, as you said, that is the example of the ECG that is sending data continually for 24 hours, for instance, and we have to process and be sure that that data is properly sent and delivered to the rest of the process. And also we have, and it's important that you highlight, related to the consent, and in this case, the assent also of the children. We are talking about two situations, and also the process that is not only the consent period of the study, but also during the process of the study, this can change, and we need to update those consents and so on. If I am not wrong, the traditional procedure is that patients should go again and meet to the doctors and update that information. It's a very slow, complex, and yeah, process. Is quite boring, let's say, in a simple way for patient, let's say. So in this way, and I open this question to Despina, how we can address this with the blockchain, how does blockchain can actually improve this process related to the consent of patients and assent of children in this scenario of the clinical trials?
Thank you for the question, Jose Gabriel. So, as Giuseppe said, and you mentioned, the consent is one of the most important parts of a clinical trial. It's actually the most important one. Without the consent, nothing can start in a clinical trial. And just to highlight how important it is basically the thing that once you basically consent to participate in the study, that's when everything starts getting compiled about you and all the processes start and everything can be continued. So what consent can do is you can basically give empowerment to the patient, to the participant in the clinical trial, to decide what they want to do. So if they can we can track what's happening in near real time. We can also track the processes around those participants in the trial. So there are many chances that you might consent to a study and after a while something changes. Once they say a new procedure gets added, you have to be reconsented. And because there are a lot of processes involved in a clinical trial, you might not immediately consent, which is not good. It's one good example that has been identified from the annual reports from the regulatory authorities is that over 50% of processes are inadequate to ensure the clinical trial's quality, and over 50% of those identified that clinical trial records are inaccurate usually. And this happens because everything around e-consent is, it's difficult to track it. There are so many things happening around this. That's why we need to fix this, because in the end we have approximately 5 to 10% of problems found in compliance and with the clinical trial protocol. And to everybody who doesn't know what a clinical trial protocol is, it's basically an instruction manual on how to do the clinical trial. What happens usually with all this process when you basically are not 100% compliant is that you have siloed information and there is less transparency. Then you can see that the inspections are happening later on. They are limited to the post-compliant, non-compliance. And this is a very inefficient and very complex system. And as Giuseppe said, the data cleaning everything is happening in a slower rate than it should. So what blockchain can do is it can add a lot of values in this, because we will be able to trace everything. And at the same time, we will have no siloed information when there is something transferred from one actor to the other actor, which is a very important thing. Also, it adds trust, and it's really important that we have compliance as well, because the most important thing for the clinical trial for everybody is the patient's safety, and that also that their data is secure. So by adding a system like blockchain to make sure that the patient, everything happens near real time and everything is addressed near real time, any changes are immediately taken on board. And at the same time, we know that the patient has being empowered to basically decide what they want to do with their data is really important. It can really help. I hope I have answered the question in one way. Would anybody else like to add something else in this?
As far as the e-consent goes, I agree. That's one of the most important parts of the clinical trial, and actually for the patient itself to consent to participate. I want to go back to at least what Giuseppe was mentioning about the data collection with these devices. And for us, from a pharmaceutical perspective, if we actually have, let's say, multiple sites, let's say Giuseppe is just one site and we're collecting information from him, we actually are working with multiple sites, multiple countries from a pharmaceutical perspective. And for us to be able to collect that device data and process that quicker, or actually, as you mentioned, Despina, about the safety of the patients, we want to make sure that if there's something that's coming up in one of our studies, that we react quickly and make sure that we address that. So we see that the devices themselves, pulling that information in, coming up with some smart alerts that we may put right in blockchain that would send it out directly to maybe not only the patient, maybe not only the caregiver, maybe to the principal investigator, and maybe if there's anybody else that we need to notify, we can go ahead and do that really quickly.
If I also can step in, I think it's very important to actually mention the IoT and the combination IoT plus blockchain, because the blockchain, as actually Giuseppe mentioned, and it's mentioned by many people all around, I think, who studied a little bit blockchain, just, some basics, would associate blockchain with a trust. So it's something that gives a trust. So with the IoT, that's a lack of the trust that we can see, in the pool of the research and in the clinical trials as well. So the blockchain actually brings this kind of module or aspect that can change the game dramatically to the benefits of all the parties involved. So yeah, I would say that the combination, the hybrid solution of the blockchain, adapting the blockchain in the IoT would be a crucial support of the clinical trials. And actually, I also wanted to link that when we talk about a clinical trial, it's not only the trial itself, and the devices also involved, not only the collecting the data and then the data management, but also we talk about the supply chain. So, for example, for the clinical trial, we will talk mostly not about only IoT, but IOMT, which is the Internet of Medical Things, right? But for the supply chain, we would talk about exactly IoT, different sensors that would allow actually the transparency of handling the products, on the way to the delivery, and if something was violated or not. For example, the temperature excursion or the humidity, or maybe the products, the drugs were handled not care with little care. So I think that the IoT brings value not only the patient who is participating in the trial within the trial, yes, starting of course from the consent, but also actually increasing the safety if we consider the use of drugs.
I definitely agree with what you're saying, Christina. May I also add that from a CRO's perspective, clinical research organization, this system is extremely important, because that way we can have confidence in everything that we have, that we are using the most current documentation, because basically when you are participating in a clinical trial, there are sometimes, most of the times actually, changes that happen for the actual study. So you need to always make sure that everybody's updated with the latest version, for example, of the consent document for the participant. And the blockchain could really leverage this, because we could make sure that we're using the most current documentation in all the associated places. And at the same time, we will be able to manage this process, because sometimes different clinical sites, the clinical sites are the places where the study takes place, like where Giuseppe is at. So we make sure that they are using the most current version for those specific places as well, and everything is dealt real time. So there are not many protocol deviations which we are trying to avoid. At the same time, from a CRA perspective, which I am, it's also adding the advantage that we have reduced time to verify the data, because it will be easier to make sure that nobody would actually try to alter in a fraudulent way the system, which is extremely important as well. And this increases the patient's safety. And at the same time, in times like this, with COVID-19 ongoing, this can assist remote work, which cannot happen in sometimes when there are situations like this and you cannot go to the site to verify the information. So you have to wait, which obviously it's causing some further protocol deviations and issues.
I think actually the pandemic that is happening right now brings maybe a need of digitalizing the processes that were not before. So I think it's the pushing the whole industry reconsidering how not only the data can be managed, but the whole processes could be improved. Yeah.
Yeah, I know we also have talked about putting at least the device management into blockchain as well. So at least when you're assigning a device, you're putting that information out there. When that device is, let's say, retired, or another device is assigned to that same patient, all that information can be tracked in our blockchain. Same thing is if there's any particular a version maybe that's on the device. We don't want to have the device version changing throughout the clinical study, or if it does, then we want to make sure that we know when that actually changed. So having that information in blockchain, easily accessible and non-modifiable, is something that we actually are looking forward to as well.
I agree. I may also extend to the fact that this whole blockchain system can also assist in other areas of the clinical trial. For example, the clinical supply, where you have the product where it's get manufactured to the point that it actually gets to the participant. It is really important because there are many different people usually involved in those processes. So it is very difficult for different systems to unite, or when they unite or they try to collaborate at least, this is causing again siloed information. So some things are actually not transferred the same way as it should, which is making things unnecessarily complicated. And it's removing some really important credentials, and obviously trust and audit is more difficult to achieve this way.
Yes, if I can add something, blockchain can improve clinical trial process both from patient point of view and researcher and CRO and the sponsor, but we have not mentioned the regulatory agency. So we have seen in 10 months developing a new effective vaccine for COVID-19. The process were the same. We have had phase 1, 2, and 3 studies, but in this context, the FDA and the European Medicine Agency have reached to verify all the data in such a short time. Using this technology, using blockchain and allowing the regulatory agency to access to the data in a regular matter and in a trustable matter will help to have in a shorter time, effective medicine, not only for COVID-19, but for any other disease. So this is really important. We have understood this in a global emergency, but we need to take home the lesson and try to have effective and safe vaccine and medicine using tools provided by technology in a shorter time.
If I may jump in, I think that right now we are talking, all of us would agree on lots of different use cases that could be found in the, in the applicability to the clinical trials, to the processes around the clinical trial. And of course, we talk about the blockchain plus IoT, right? So I think that it's actually posing a hybrid solution, which is of course different to just, plain application of either blockchain or IoT. And I think that, so we would align, of course, on lots of hopes that we have towards this hybrid solution. But I think it's also very important to understand the challenges that it brings. So, for example, as Jose Gabriel mentioned before, the IoT is a field that no one is questioning what it is. Everyone knows IoT, that's Internet of Things, and what is the application. Basically, we cannot imagine our life right now without IoT. It's I think it will stay with us forever, right? The blockchain is, of course, it's a new technology, and which means, of course, it brings a lot of value already, a lot of hope, of course. It promises many things around the trust and security and privacy. There are many terminology that are transparency that are actually related or associated with the blockchain. But and actually to mention that both still, even those processes, the IoT is more, let's say, established compared to blockchain, both of the fields, they poses their challenges. But we are dealing not only with the blockchain or IoT, as was mentioned, but combination. And that combination actually discovers the new directions of the challenges or issues or problems to be solved. I can, I think, name a few of them just to give, let's say, an example. So when we talk about adopting blockchain in the IoT, there is a processing issue that might come. When I say processing, it's, the blockchain is a resource-hungry technology, yeah? So, for example, the mining process and the complex cryptography that come in on the background, they takes a lot of, energy and, I think that's obviously for all the people involved in the research and development. And on the other hand, when we talk about IoT, Internet of Medical Devices, the trend goes towards small devices, wearables, smart bands, some small devices that will not affect our life, right? So, and that you can see, it's kind of that combination of them, of these two technologies poses the challenge towards the battery, actually, and the energy limitation and the storage. Yeah, because again, when the, any phone, any device goes smaller, they cut the battery. They're trying to actually invent some new processes or technologies, but still it's kind of the storage and the energy that the batteries, they're demanding. Yeah, and then we link this to the storage, which actually for the IoT devices that are happening that are used in the clinical trials, they process huge amount of data. So we talk about a really large flow of data. And this data, of course, should be treated and stored either in blockchain or other solutions. And so we have the storage challenge. But I think that to the audience, to give a little bit of the background, as we are from the PharmaLedger project, we're working on this project. We are working on the off-chain solution. So with OpenDSU, that Xenia, our coordinator, mentioned earlier. And I think that it's kind of, also linking the challenges of lack of technical details around the world. So when I started, just joined the project and I started to study, what's around this area, I found that there are solutions, but, so little technical details. And of course, I understand that the market and the competition and people try to, to do their own work in their way. But on the other hand, that lacks of the faster growth and development of the technology. And I think that it's, from the perspective of PharmaLedger, we are doing some significant work because the project will disseminate the result, and that will be able to be reused in the other either products or research and development products or solutions. So that's to be mentioned. I can go on with the challenges. It's just like, guys, step in and we can continue on the challenges if you're interested.
Yeah, at least from the pharmaceutical perspective, coming up with the API to pull information from those devices. It's great to be part of PharmaLedger, where we actually can cover that through multiple pharmaceutical companies, multiple sites, and CROs as well, trying to figure out what device companies, let's say, allow us to go ahead and create an API to pull that information directly from, let's say, their secure cloud or their secure database into our secure area to be able to go ahead and, like you were saying, Christina, is either put that in blockchain if that's where it's required, or put it into our DSUs and have that in a secure location. So I think in this type of an environment, we'll be able to go ahead and make that list of devices that we have APIs a much larger list than we would if we were actually working independently on the same task.
Yes, indeed, and I think that it's just not possible to put all the data on the ledger, because that's an enormous amount of data. And the ledger is, I think, generally tend to be used for let's say, sealing the particular deals. Yes, originally, yes, it's, let's say, coming from the finance direction. Yes, it's the ledger, it's from the accounting. So yeah, and then I think that we need to kind of balance on, use of the blockchain and balance it with the other solutions available. For example, IoT, then we're coming to the cloud computing and so on. And of course, there is a huge need for the off-chain solutions, because this is the only way. Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Well, just to jump in, we have received just some questions already for the audience, so I think it will be interesting because complement part of the discussion that we have so far. So one of them is related directly to energy consumption, for instance. One that I see that is quite interesting. And the question is, well, it's more than a comment, but I think will be interesting for you to complement. It says that energy consumption of DLT can be optimized open the use case and should not be a problem. That's a proposal for this, but I think it's quite important to understand also that we are dealing with a lot of data that is being processed full time, and in some of the cases, depending on the scenario, we have to deal with real-time processing and sending data. So that process of energy consumption is something that has to be addressed quite well. And another thing that is, I think, is interesting to comment, if I am not wrong, is one of the things that especially Todd is dealing with is related to the data silos. One of the things that, and it was commented before already, is that we are dealing with a lot of data that needs to be analyzed and processed, and different components related to the clinical trial have access to that. But then part of that data that can be quite important to use is lost, and we cannot use it in a better shape. So I think I can open here to Todd in order to give us more context related to that of the data silos and how you're envisioned to using blockchain and the advantage that IoT also give us to the process, because it's now more data that we have to manage now using these technology.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess looking at a larger vision, e-consent is one of the first things that we work through, and then once we have that, then that maybe opens up the data sharing units that we actually have collected all that data. So we're breaking down those silos, because in the past, or let's say currently, we're still collecting device information, maybe lab information, and that information is then added into the clinical study later on in the process. So if we can actually break down that silo and have the data coming in at the same time we're actually collecting the case report form information, and that can be joined together, so it gives you a more holistic view. You don't have those data silos where you have those data transfers late in the process, and then you have to do all the reconciliation and the cleaning part of it. And then in addition, you're trying to make sure that everything is resolved before you're actually wrapping up the clinical study and closing out the site. The other view that I would say that we have is what we can do is prepare for us to be ready for personalized medicine as well. So outside of the clinical studies, if we actually have patients, let's say, consenting to open up their electronic health record and then let patients be discovered that way, we can go ahead and recruit patients faster for clinical studies, getting those clinical studies run a little bit faster that way and completed. And then if they're still consenting in that process, then bringing in real world evidence or real world data to go ahead and allow them to, let's say, or their physicians to offer suggestions on maybe alternate treatments or other methods that may improve their health, and whether they're eating a certain way, or if there's a particular new treatment that's available that would match up to that patient, then that would be another way that the data silos being broken down would actually allow them to have that personalized medicine approach.
I think what actually Todd just highlighted is the complexity and the need of all the potential use cases to be in the synergy, right? So when we talk about just, let's say, clinical supply or just supply chain in the pharma industry, it will be always linked to the patients somehow, right? And then we talk about how it is linked, and then it links to another use case. So I think, yeah, when we work also on the solutions that let's say there is a manufacturing process of drugs, there is a process of a clinical trial, and further data management, personalized health, which is kind of service that is running after the clinical trial finished. Yeah, let's assume there is clinical trial about actually discovering either the service should be somehow established in the hospital, like telemedicine service, or not. So we talk about the whole complex picture of the healthcare, which involves probably most of the stakeholders in the field of pharma and healthcare.
That's true, and it's also adding another advantage as well to this whole system, because with the clinical trial recruitment as well, where we have a big problem with meeting the recruitment timeline, so basically slowing down potential things that would be advantageous to people for their treatments, we can have the advantage now to empower patients to search themselves for something that they would like to participate in a clinical trial, and at the same time choose which one they would like to participate as well, which is going to be an advantage, instead of basically them trying themselves to find a clinical trial, or everything being slowed down because we haven't managed to meet the timelines for the recruitment.
Yeah, guys, the more we talk, the more I believe that it's very truly combined, all the benefits that the potential solutions can bring, and all the challenges that, of course, will have to be addressed by technical people. Otherwise, even lacking one of the aspects, and there are quite many vulnerable aspects when we talk about the medical field, about drugs, about health data mainly. So yeah, I think that my message would be that people working in this field should, of course, focus on how to solve those problems in a most efficient way, of course. And I think that I want to emphasize the collaboration of efforts. As I mentioned previously, there is lack of technical details, and I think that would be beneficial for the research results, and anything that is becoming a product before was research and development. So I think that it's crucial, to share these lessons learned through the whole industry. Otherwise, the people will kind of run the same circles. Maybe that would be slightly different, but still. And another point that I think I want to bring is the actually lack of standards. So we already agreed that we are dealing not only with the IoT or blockchain, but a combo. And I think earlier it was mentioned by our coordinator, Ksenia, that we are looking for agnostic solution in the pharma ledger. And I think that the main benefit of this agnostic solution would be actually it will kind of govern the interaction between IoT, the medical Internet of Medical Things, blockchain, the artificial intelligence processing or cloud computing. That's all, because we are talking about so many other technologies that need to be involved to support the processes, but the technology, the core technology, should be then agnostic, the platform or infrastructure. Otherwise, I think that people who are working in the healthcare, they would, or work for the industry, they know the problems of actually interoperability of the data and integration of different systems. I think that it's a pain of all the people, regardless, regardless country, regardless anything, platforms. That will be always a problem. And I think that the standardization bodies should get also kind of on speed, and to have a multidisciplinary team on board to kind of support the processes. To ensure
that's a very important issue, and I was going to highlight, just to comment, and thank you for starting that comment. At the end, one of the things with IoT technologies, at the end, the providers works traditionally by themselves. Let's say they have their close solution, and it's quite complex to access to their technology, and they are trying in a way to not share their solutions. That's the traditional way, let's say, of IoT technology, and this is a quite important challenge that has to be addressed in order to improve even more the scenarios that are trying to deal with. And I open the floor here also to UCB as and Todd, especially as a technologist in the pharmaceutical companies. How do you see to address these challenges in a way that we can integrate different type of IoT technologies with different type of brands that they are trying to stick to their know-how, let's say? How we can challenge that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm glad we do actually have our technical experts in the pharma ledger as well, because in the pharma industry, we do try to have everything standardized, but again, every company is going to have something different, and if you actually acquire another company, they're going to have their own standards, so you have to adopt either one standard or the other, or convert. So we have to figure that out. But at least when we were talking about the IoT providers, we were talking about bringing that information into our DSUs. And we've been discussing at least the DSUs that are, let's say, schemaless. So you can bring in that data just by telling it what columns you're bringing in, and then you don't have to have all the columns when you're designing that DSU. So in my point of view, not super technical about it, it looks like we'll be able to handle those differences between the providers when the data is actually allowed to flow through those APIs into our DSUs. And maybe Christina, maybe you actually can talk a little bit more about the technical aspect of it, because I know that we've at least come up with the ideas on how we're going to be able to store that.
I started to speak on mute. Sorry about that. It's a common problem. I think that generally speaking, we highlighted already the need for the open, the need for the off-chain solution, which for us it will be Open DSU, and OpenDSU is a development which is growing, of course, and we're contributing to this. And I think there are many applications to that. So I think that the most crucial to understand, and I hope that actually, I mean, I don't want to bring any drama, but I would like to express that, you know, sometimes people say that we can use like smart contracts, and that's kind of everywhere considered being a saver, yeah, a smart contract, something automates the process that is needed. But from the perspective of patient, actually, it gives a lot of vulnerability. And I think that the point, I'm not sure if I'm answering or not, but the point I wanted to bring, not to forget, that when we talk about solutions and how the data will be stored and how the data will be passed, I think all of us agree that the terms that are used, it's a privacy, security, confidentiality, anonymization, but then, you know, they're interchangeably used, which sometimes it's might not be actually the, you know, the right, the same meaning of all the words. I think it's important to understand when we talk about any technical solution, what exactly we want to give to the patient. For example, the confidentiality is the one that gives the, you know, the power to decide or to control what data, you know, to be used and by who. So, you know, I think that that's one of the use cases. We say that we want to empower patients, you know, to participate in general, you know, to give this feeling not only the trust, but control over the, you know, the data. And then we say that it's private, but then it's about confidentiality, not the privacy. You know, the privacy is about actually the right to give the data, to keep the data for themselves. But as we already identified, the data will go somewhere. Yeah, and of course it depends, and I think that it's still in the discovery for the pharma ledger by each of these use case, exactly who is the owner, yes, who is creating those DSUs. And so DSU, to give some details to the audience, it's a data sharing units, so it's off-chain solution that gives a flexibility of the management, actually, of these, I would say, sharing the access to particular pieces of data. And as I'm also participate in the design in these types, in working on one of the use cases, I can say that it's very flexible, which of course any technical people will like. Yeah.
Do you see are there any other major technical challenges in the development of those solutions that we want to achieve?
And to be honest, I think that there are actually, as I mentioned before, my personal opinion, you know, the more, as you know, Aristotle said one time, and it's one of my favorite phrases, the more you know, the more you don't know. Yeah, so the more you discover issues to be solved, the more you discover the things that actually untouched up to moment and needs to, you know, the attention to be brought to those things. I think that definitely depends on the use case, and I mean not use case that the clinical trial we're talking about, but even inside of the clinical trial, the IoT could be used differently, right? So I think that it depends. I listed already some of you know, the processing, the storage. I would say more about the mobility. I mean, that's all actually linked. So the challenge would be the mobility. So what I mean here is that you know, the blockchain as it is designed, let's say, for a fixed network topology. But when the person has a variable, or I don't know, some device monitoring some vitals, that is actually, you know, kind of an event of continuous change of the topology, which is a challenge to my belief. Also, when we talk about IOMT, we talk about the real-time data. So it's, you know, sometimes even a second, and I think that all of us agree, who especially have experience in the clinical trials, and not only clinical trials, but, you know, worked with the services that are provided to patients, where even 1 second, even less than that, could cause, you know, or could cost a life of a person, or, you know, some abilities not to be lost, let's say. So in that way, I think there would be a challenge of actually, you know, processing the time that will be needed for the processing. For example, for blocks creation, it takes some time. Yeah, I'm not sure about the synchronization of things. So that would be also the key to discover. But I think that, also even in the Pharma Ledger, we work on something that we, of course, give a promise to become a final product. I believe also for us, and we have 29 partners on board. For us, it also gives a great experience, a great opportunity to kind of see different perspectives and maybe come up to something that it's more of a value, because as we say, sometimes 2 heads is better than 1. Well, 29 is probably better than 2. Well, it's sometimes probably not so easy to find this, consensus, but I think that generally it works. And I think that those challenges with the solution that we're working on, we might not solve all of them. And that's absolutely fine. That's normal thing. The most important that we are actually doing that. And I think, once again, I want to highlight that there are not so many activities, especially open activities towards this direction, the hybrid of blockchain plus IoT. So I think, yeah. Thank you for the question, Despina.
Thank you as well for the answer, Christina. I may also add that one small challenge, well, not small challenge, but one challenge that is not technical, it's the fact that we might have people like regulators or sponsors or some other actors that might not want to take this new technology. They consider it as a risk because they don't know about this. I think that is also one challenge that we might have to face at some point, especially when it is quite a rather new technology for the clinical trials and health sector mainly, not Bitcoin, for example. And we also have people that are quite resistant to change. But I think once we surpass this issue, it will show the value that we can add.
I think it's a brilliant point, actually, Despina, you brought. It's adoption of the technology. It's indeed, that's another challenge that, will be faced for sure. But yeah, brilliant.
Thank you, Christina.
Giuseppe, please.
Yes, I agree with Despina. Sure, regulatory agencies are more keen to have a conservative approach. So to be accepted the new technology, we have to well communicate and what we are doing in this EU-funded project is just this, test this technology and offer the advantage to the stakeholders. I think that also I agree with Christina about the challenge of address well the privacy and confidentiality, not only for legal point of view, but also, and this is a complex scenario since in EU we have recently the GDPR that was not enough well understood by both investigators and participants. We have the challenge ahead to show this technology as an help for the patient to take control of their own data. And this is not an easy task since this is a new technology. It's not easy to show it by to common people without competence. And so we will have this challenge ahead.
That's totally right, Giuseppe. Todd, do you want to comment something else?
Sure. Well, at least from the sponsor's perspective, we actually don't want to burden the sites with, these new technologies that maybe don't add value. But that's what we were looking for. Is, like Giuseppe said, they're more conservative. We're probably even more conservative being a sponsor. That we want to go ahead and make sure that what we're going to suggest or what we're going to roll out and put in our protocol is something that the sites are really going to want to work with and make their lives easier. So that's what we actually consider from our side.
Excellent. Well, we only have 3 minutes before closing the session. So first of all, thank you all for joining and give us your vision of all this process. And I would like just in 30 seconds, if you want to please give a final statement from your different point of view, more than welcome, so we can have close the session. So I think I will start with the same flow as the beginning. I will open the floor to Giuseppe to give us a final comment. We have only 3 minutes left, so 30 seconds each, and we close the session.
Okay, just say that this project is showing different point of view from clinician, from sponsor, from CRO, from engineer, physician, and also patients. So I think that this way to put all together, speaking, providing their different point of view is the right one. I hope that companies will take over their, and they are showing it, their interest in not collaborating. We are seeing a good collaboration between companies, and I think that it is the right way to go on.
Thank you. Despina?
So I agree, basically. This is going to be this whole system. There are some challenges that we'll have to face as we are developing this, but there is a lot of potential. And since our aim is to put the patient first, and this is going to provide a really enormous advantageous aspect to this whole system, so that we can ensure their safety up to the nearest detail as much as we can. So I'm looking forward to how this whole project develops to go.
Thank you. Cristina?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists, because I think it was a really great discussion with lots of different opinions. And I think that my message would be, the competition maybe is a force for driving the progress, but I think that at this stage we need synergy. And when I say we, it's all people involved in somehow, not only in PharmaLedger, of course, but I'm talking right now to the audience, right, who are doing research or research development of products, either from the side of the pharma business or, the technical companies. So I believe in synergy of, the technologies, use cases, the stakeholders, and the most importantly, I believe here in a balance between the business industry people and the technology people. I think we reached the moment where, combining the efforts, being equal and combining the efforts here, we would achieve much more than either alone or disbalanced, the level of the communication and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd, please.
Yep, I'm definitely excited. We're getting closer and closer to that proof of concept that we're going to bring all this together and be able to go ahead and display that. So I'm looking forward to that. That's right around the corner. So hopefully we'll be able to announce something soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much to all. Thank you, Victoria, for setting up all the session to all of us, and thank you to the audience. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day with the very interesting sessions that we're going to have. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.